A large portion of the Jewish nation has returned to its homeland, but the heart, soul, and mind of much of the Jewish nation are still in exile mode. This state of affairs must and will inevitably change. This is Torah Nation TV from Jerusalem, and we are speaking with the head of Machon Shilo, Rabbi David Bar-Hayim. Shalom, Rabbi Bar-Hayim.
Shalom.
Many people are accustomed to respond to the beginning of a bracha by saying Baruch Hu uVaruch Shemo. Is this practice obligatory?
This practice is in fact not only not obligatory, but as we will explain, it is in fact preferable not to act in such a manner. But let us begin at the beginning and say as follows. Hazal never mention any such response to any bracha, Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo, to hearing Shem Hashem. This is something unknown to Hazal and was unknown until apparently the father of the Rosh, Rabbeinu Yehiel, whom the Rosh quotes in a Teshuvah, which is then quoted by the Rosh's son, Rabbeinu Yaakov, in the Turim, as I will presently explain. This practice began with the father of the Rosh, Rabbeinu Yehiel, who, of his own volition and due to his own feeling and perception that this was a proper thing to do, this practice grew up and spread over time. So let us quote from the Tur in Orach Hayim Siman Kaf Daled. Here the Tur quotes from the Teshuvah written by his father the Rosh, and he writes as follows. Shamati mi abi Abba Mari, this is the Rosh writings referring to his father Rabbeinu Yehiel, Shahaya Omer al kol baracha uvaracha shaya shomea b'chol makom. It was his practice to respond to any bracha that he heard, the beginning of the bracha, hearing Shem Hashem, Baruch Atah Hashem, he would respond, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo. Wazeu she'amar Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom, and this, the Rosh says that this can be connected to what we find in the Pasuk, in the Torah, where Moshe Rabbeinu says to Am Yisrael, Ki Shem Adonai Ekra, when I mention the name of Hashem, Havu Godel Lelohenu, you give homage and praise to Hashem. And furthermore, afilu keshemazkirim tzaddik basar wadam, even when we mention a very righteous human being, tzarich levarecho, we are instructed by Hazal in Bereshit Rabbah to, when hearing the person's name, to quote the pasuk in Mishleh and say zecher tzaddik livracha. So the practice of Rabbeinu Yehiel was without a doubt very well intentioned. His purpose, his aim was to give homage and greatness and to praise Hashem's name whenever it is heard. And this, one would imagine, is a very wonderful and very good thing to emulate. And the Rosh also apparently thought so, because he quotes it and does not mention in any way that he disagrees, and the same can be said for the Tur, Rabbeinu Yaakov, the son of the Rosh. But, as I said, this is a very new concept, relatively speaking. It is also quoted, one should mention, that same Siman, in Siman Chof Kaf Dal in the Shulchan Aruch, and there it just simply says that one must always say Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo. So, on that basis, one would also perhaps imagine that this is a hovah, this is something which is obligatory. But the fact of the matter is that there are a number of very simple and powerful reasons why we should not follow this practice, despite the fact that it is obviously very well intentioned. And people who do this to this day obviously are trying to do something which is good and proper and correct. And yet, it is not a practice that I can recommend. It is not a practice that quite a number of poskim were able to recommend. One of those poskim is the Gra, the Gaon Mevilna, and I will read to you something that he writes in Ma'aseh Rav. In Ma'aseh Rav, which is a collection of Halachic practices and statements from the Gra, written down by his students, we find in Siman Mem Gimel as follows. This is a statement referring to how one should conduct oneself during the repetition of the Amidah by the Shlech Tzibur. And the Gra says, Lishmo'a tefilat shmone esre mipi Shlech Tzibur u'mitoch hasidur. In other words, his first statement is, you must listen and take note and pay attention to what the Shliach Tzibur says during Hazrat HaShas. So this is what you are supposed to do. This in fact is a requirement, and therefore we also recommended following the Shliach Tzibur in the Sidur in order to be fully focused. Furthermore, he says, وَلَعَنُوث Amen ahar kol baracha, and to answer Amen at the end of each baracha. This is also something which is clearly a requirement, something which is a chovah, it is obligatory. وَلَا لَحَكْپِيد al baruch hu baruch shemo. And on the other hand, one does not need to say baruch hu baruch shemo. It is not necessary to be pedantic about saying this response. Why not? כי השליח ציבור אינו ממתין עד שתכלה מפי העם ומפסיד חזרת התפילה. Because it is very common, says the Gra, to find that the Shliach Tzibur does not take into account the fact that people are answering to the first part of the bracha, to his statement, Baruch Atah Hashem, people respond, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo. He does not take this into account, and he continues straight on to the second part of the bracha. So, for example, let's say the bracha in question is Baruch Atah Hashem, Mevarech Hashanim. So he says Baruch Atah Hashem, people respond, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo. As they're saying that, he's already saying Mevarech Hashanim, and therefore people miss the second half of the bracha. And this is a problem. This results in something called an Amen Yethoma. In other words, saying Amen when one did not hear the bracha, the actual ending of the bracha. And therefore, this practice, which was intended as something positive and good, ends up creating a problem. That's one problem. And this is also quoted, this issue is also mentioned by the Mishnah Berurah, and therefore he recommends that a Shliach Tzibur deliberately take his time when saying each bracha of the Shmoneh Esrei, for example. In other words, to say Baruch Atah Hashem and to wait whilst people say Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo, and wait till people have finished that response, and only then complete the bracha and say Mevarech Hashanim, for example. This is not a bad solution, perhaps, but the fact is most Chazanim, most Shlichei Tzibur, either have not read that statement of the Mishnah Berurah or have not taken it upon themselves to act in accordance with it, and therefore the result is that, again, many people miss the actual bracha itself, which is the ikar, which is the main thing. And therefore the reciting of Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, which is something additional and something which is not required, ends up being detrimental and causing harm to something else which is required, something which is a chovah. So that which is an optional extra, when it causes a difficulty or a problem with regards to something which is a chovah, something which is an obligation, it is preferable to drop the optional extra, and not endanger the ikar, the main thing that we are trying to achieve, which is to hear the bracha from the Shliach Tzibur from beginning to end, and to recite Amen. This is one problem that is mentioned by a number of the Posukim, including the Mishnah Berurah. A second problem, pointed out by a number of Ahronim, and again quoted by the Mishnah Berurah, is the fact that when a person is listening to a bracha, which is intended to be motzi yedei harabim, in other words, to the person is reciting the bracha in order, in your stead, in your place. In other words, you are listening to this bracha, and it is your obligation to hear the whole bracha, because it is something that otherwise you yourself would have to do. For example, when blowing the shofar or when reading the Megillah, the person doing this act of reading the Megillah or blowing the shofar recites the bracha aloud, and then he goes on to perform the mitzvah of reading the Megillah, for example. At that time, when one hears that bracha, many Ahronim have pointed out that it is definitely wrong to answer Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo, because at that point you are listening to a bracha which is being said by someone else but for you, and you are being yotzei the chovah by hearing that bracha. In other words, it's as if you yourself are reciting that bracha, and just as a person cannot say Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo in the middle of his own bracha, so he cannot say Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo in response to a bracha which is being said for him by someone else, so that he himself, as it were, is reciting that bracha himself. And therefore, to start explaining to people which bracha one can respond to and which one cannot respond to with Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo, and to teach and train all the Shlichei Tzibur to slow down and take it easy and not be in a rush to get to the end of the bracha, etc., etc. All these issues are not readily remedied, and the end result is not a good one. And therefore, this is another instance where we see the wisdom of the words of Hazal, Kol HaMosif Gorea. Anyone who adds is in fact detracting. By adding we are in fact detracting, and therefore it is best not to add, and therefore not to detract, but to remain faithful to the words of Chazal and act precisely according to their instructions.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.